Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you? I really enjoyed watching your lesson the other day.
Thank you so much.
So, in order to get started today, we're going to talk about some reinforcements that I saw, so that some things that we can work on, and then also some about those wonderful strengths that I saw during your lesson. So, before we begin, I want to ask, how do you feel that your lesson went?
I thought the lesson went well. I felt like the students really responded to the physical response for character. I feel like that was a great way to get them to remember character by just doing that action. And then I felt like they really loved Mr. Gruff. I felt like that was a great way to introduce characters, kind of a fun way to get the lesson started. But overall, I feel like the students were very respectful. I feel like they paid attention, and I thought it was a great lesson.
Yeah, I really enjoyed seeing that visual cue of Mr. Gruff. You stated the objective, you were very animated. You referred back to the objective by saying we're using Mr. Gruff to identify characters within this story through the illustrations that we're seeing. You had that physical response back saying point to your character, and they said me. That was a really great start to your lesson. How would you gauge student understanding as you were reading to the class?
So that was the I do portion of the lesson. I mean, it was a new objective and it was a new story we were starting. So I definitely was modeling how a reader can use those illustrations to identify a character. I would have students turn to their partner and discuss how the character is being described through those illustrations. And while those partners are discussing, I could walk around the circle and just listen into their conversations to make sure we were all on the same page. Or I could even just listen intently to the conversations that were happening around me to gauge their understanding during the lesson.
That's You're mentioning engagement, and I love that. So I noticed that you were using a tree map up on the board as you were reading the story. And as you said, you would in the future use that engagement and student partners to reinforce what you were reading. Now, how would you also engage students as you were going over that tree map?
So I guess next time I use the tree map, I could have the students fill out one as we work through it as a class. So that way they have that practice filling out the tree map. And then I could have their partners check to make sure we were following along, students were understanding the tree map. So that way, when they do work on the tree map by themselves, they already have that example and foundation because we worked on it together.
Yeah, absolutely. Having that evidence of their learning would be a good way to gauge if they were understanding the lesson objective up until that point. After you did that tree map, you were asking them to work independently at their desk. So you gave them directions to move away from the carpet area that you were on, and they were to go get their workbooks and sit back down. What visual cues could you use to reinforce those directions for the students who maybe didn't hear your directions the first time?
Yeah, so normally I would put the directions on the board, either the smart board or the whiteboard. So that way students who might have forgot what their next steps were could just look back at the board and see what they need to do. So yeah, normally I would put those directions on the board for those visual learners.
Okay, yeah, those visual cues are so important for students who maybe didn't catch it. We all like having something to reference back to. So that would be really a really strong thing to do in order to support those students. When you're planning, your whole group lesson was great. You were reading throughout the whole story. You were mentioning and referring back to the characters and the illustrations that you saw and going over your tree map. But when you are reading aloud and considering the possible interactions between students, how what do you do to ensure that they're interacting with each other in order to support their understanding of that objective?
Yeah, so during the you do portion of the lesson, I would have students work together with their partners, and they would be using their partner reading strategies to fill out the tree map. And then while the partners are working on it, I would be walking around the room to monitor student understanding and then check in with groups just to see how it's going, clarify any confusions.
Absolutely. And proximity is such a powerful thing to use for student engagement and redirection. I also loved the way that your classroom was set up. You had a room to move about. Your classroom environment was safe and warm and welcoming, and I really enjoyed being in your classroom. So thank you for allowing me in to observe, and I am looking forward to continue reflecting with you as you grow this year.
Thank you so much.